All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm really glad to welcome you to our session of the Wild Wisconsin Winter Web Conference. My name is Leah Langby. I'm from the IFLIS Library System in Eau Claire, and I am joined today by Lori Freund from the Bridges Library System as a backup moderator. And we're very glad that you're here with us and taking a break from maybe watching One Piece to join us today for our session. I'm very, very pleased to welcome Kimberly Poe from the Connecticut State Library, and she'll be talking to us about programming, partnership, and burnout. And she will be taking questions throughout. You can go ahead and put in your questions throughout, and then we will answer them at the end. All right. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Wisconsin. Oh my gosh, it's just so fun. Thank you for having me. Like Leah said, my name is Kim or Kimberly, whatever floats your boat. Poe, I am the Children and Young Adult Consultant with the Connecticut State Library, and I'm really happy to be here. I love getting invites places. So today we are going to talk about programming, partnership, and burnout. And ultimately, what we're going to go over today, it's not going to be a specific program, which I think is on the docket for a few other things and a few other panels during your conference over the next 2 days. And I've watched some of the recordings. You guys have some great things happening out there. We're going to talk about programming holistically. Within this conversation, we're going to talk about the importance of community, which is, you're going to hear me say that word a ton. So please prepare yourself. We're going to talk a little bit about evaluating program success. If we have time, I'm going to give you a few examples of some community-driven programs within my state. And we're going to talk about defeating burnout via partnership. So as Leah mentioned a little bit, I'd like to take the bulk of my questions at the end. There should be time. But if there are any clarifying questions, if I say something you don't understand, or if I get a bit muffled or talk too fast, please interrupt me so that, we can all kind of stay on the same boat as we go. I will have more morning coffee after this workshop. So what are libraries? I really want us to kind of start there and keep what libraries are at the forefront of our mind as we go through this presentation today. And it might be something to keep in mind as you sit through the rest of your conference. And I like to think about libraries as opportunities. They are opportunities to free access, free resources, be those books, programs, services, job boards, whatever. They're opportunities to interact with new people and with new communities. As I mentioned, I'm in children's services primarily, and the town that I last worked in had 6 elementary schools. So these kids who lived in slightly different districts of the town would come together and form friendships in our library, this sort of central hub of the community. Libraries are an opportunity to access multiple types of learning, multiple engagement opportunities, and we could all probably list a million more things. So today, we're going to talk about programming, but what I also want to kind of get us on an even slate on is what I mean when I'm saying programming, just so that we are all in the same frame of reference. In my state, we differentiate between programs and activities. Activities would be like take and makes, maybe sort of solo programs like a Where's Waldo wall, or things like that. So that's what I mean when I say programming. I'm not talking about what we call activities. And to kind of nail it down a little harder, we're going to start with what IMLS has to say about activities. So synchronous programming we're going to talk about here. Synchronous program sessions is any planned event which introduces the group attending to library services or which provides information to participants, right? So program sessions may cover library uses, library tours, think community visits, things like that. They also might provide cultural, recreational, or educational information. Examples might be film showings, story times, book clubs, ESL classes, literacy programs. These are the kinds of things that we're going to be talking about. And this is sort of what we mean when we say programming. But how do we do these things, right? How do we plan and build these story hours and film showings and literacy programs? So when we think about the average approach to programming, right? Not everyone's. There are a lot of you who are here and who are going to be watching, and everyone's going to do things a little bit differently. But let's kind of talk about sort of like a holistic average approach to programming. Maybe there's like a holiday or a special event, right? Like Halloween, Lunar New Year, Easter, something like that. And a librarian wants to do something to celebrate. So, programs or sort of days like that tend to bring in a lot of people. Holiday programming brings in a lot of registrants. Summer reading brings in a lot of registrants. So a person might start by going on Pinterest or Google or something, typing in a few keywords, find a blog post of activities, room setups, crafts, whatever. You might go to your local listserv. Those are very robust in my state here in Connecticut. Ask what others are planning. If they have something that they can share, a Google folder, a couple of documents, perhaps some sort of block booking opportunity for an author, something like that, right? Maybe you go to a conference like this one or a workshop and you learn about a successful cookbook club. The first time I heard about a cookbook club was at a conference, or like a books and brews book club in a local bar. I heard about that from a library I was visiting, a library built escape room, right? These ideas, these programming ideas are all around us. And one thing that we all say, I think every library in the world, don't reinvent the wheel. It is a waste of time. If there is someone out there who has an idea and support material and is willing to sort of talk with you through that, why not take advantage of something that this person's already done, the mistakes they've already learned, right? Don't reinvent the wheel. Who's got time for that? I certainly don't. So here's the thing. The National Impact of Library Public Programs Assessment has come up with a group of core competencies around library programming. And I just want to take a second. I have shared these slides with the organizers of this event, and all of these things are hyperlinked, so folks are able to kind of look at these resources and dive a little bit deeper on their own, just to sort of let everyone know. So they've come up with these library programming competencies: knowledge of community, interpersonal skills, creativity, and so on and so forth. You can read these. And what these mean is that these are the types of things that a person needs to have in varying capacities to execute a program. You don't have to be the most creative person in the world, but some form of creativity is helpful. Maybe you don't live in the community, so you don't know it as well as someone who does live there, but some understanding of the community is helpful. Some sort of organization around, calendars and schedules and contacts and sort of organizational skills are really helpful and necessary when organizing a library program. I like to call this information here the pre-work, right? Skipping this pre-work is what has the potential to cause problems down the road, right? And some people are doing these things or sort of have these skills or competencies and use them mindlessly. Sometimes I'm that person. A colleague will say, how do you XYZ? How do you multitask? And I'm like, I don't know, man. This is just how I function. This is just how I walk through life. So some people do some of these things subconsciously. Others have to work a little harder at them. Maybe the financial skills don't have to be super robust because you have a department head who manages that, but some sort of understanding of all of this is really helpful when organizing and planning library programs. So yeah, it's a lot. And I feel like every 5 minutes I want to say there are caveats to everything, right? Not everyone, every library, and every person, not everything is the same, but just sort of on a grandiose scale. So with all of that in mind, what does that kind of mean, right? So it means that, unfortunately, successful programs are more than just a good idea and execution. There are dimensions and subdimensions of library programming, whether we think about them or not, whether we keep them in mind when planning these programs or not, they're still there. And I think what we all sort of want to get to a place, what we're doing is we're making intentional decisions and we're keeping all of these things at the forefront of our mind and not letting them sort of accidentally assist us throughout our library programming time. So this chart, which is also from the National Impact of Library Public Programs, was organized in a way to kind of break down a variety of sort of considerations around libraries themselves, around programming, and sort of around the model and the way that these things are done. So they're broken down into, for example, library profile. What does that mean? It means, well, the type of programming that happens at a public library versus an academic library versus a K-12 library versus a special library are going to be different. And then you can break that down even farther into something like community demographics or scale, library size and capacity. Is this a rural library? Is this an urban library? In my state of Connecticut, we've got a lot of teeny tiny libraries where the only full-time person is the director. That's a size and capacity consideration, or the characteristics of the program that you are planning to offer. Is it a program that's supposed to instill knowledge into the attendees? Is it just a program to have fun, you know, a la Candy Sushi? Is it a program to share awareness of community resources? Is it, you know, to talk about environmentalism and new environmental initiatives that are happening in the community, right? What are the characteristics? What's kind of the why of the program? And then those things can be broken down even further under the other subdimensions category. Who's delivering the program? Is it a staff member? Are you bringing somebody in? Things like that. The audience, who's coming? Is it a certain demographic, a certain group of people, like children, for example, you know, birth to 3, or not? As well as what they call here program administration, but that's kind of like the development model. Is this something that the library itself built and created? Or is it something that someone else built and the library is sort of hosting that kind of situation? All of this is sort of broken down into a very, for some people, boring chart. I love charts, and this is all very fascinating to me. And as someone who does programming on a statewide level, so not just like a town, my hometown is 11 square miles, but on a state level where there are more public libraries than towns in this state, this type of information is very helpful in leading and guiding the building of programs that are going to be successful and intentionally thought out. So all of this means essentially that a great program idea is only one part of the programming process. And sometimes the missing link is intentionally authentic community, a community-focused mindset, basically. We're missing programming with the community in addition to programming for the community. Sometimes, some of us are doing great. Go ahead. Yeah, there's 190 public libraries in Connecticut and 169 towns. Some towns have 4 independently functioning libraries. I don't know why. So sometimes we're programming, instead of programming with the community, we're programming for it. And there are actually some really interesting theories about how we got there, or sort of what that means. And again, 1.5 million caveats, but this video, which I've used in sort of other things, has a really interesting breakdown and can cause for a really interesting mindset shift into the way we look at serving our public and serving our library. Oh, wait, let me make sure I share my sound.
The characteristics on the previous slide. But what I want to suggest or posit to you today is that we are doing some things through a lens that is a little off kilter and incorrect. So if we think about what a public servant does based on our readings, you know, there's that focus on the community members' needs. And then there is also an outreach component, but that outreach component is listening to the community. And the goal of that is to help us identify those needs. And then another component of a public servant is to identify issues and align resources. And then there's that last piece of co-creating solutions that empower community members and help everyone in the community thrive. So, you know, where I have been thinking is that we have become library servants, not public servants. Our focus is on our facilities and the stuff we have in them. And then instead of our outreach being more about listening, like a true public servant, a lot of time it's about being the expert who goes out in the community and tells people about the stuff in our library and how great it is and how great we are. So there's a difference there, a key difference. And then also, instead of necessarily, you know, in the front end of things, identifying issues and aligning resources, we just go out and buy stuff. We pick stuff out and buy it, and then we put it in our libraries. And then lastly, then we host programs that feature our stuff. And then oftentimes we are hosting these programs ourselves as library staff and not letting community members lead or co-lead these kinds of presentations. So I'm thinking that we have allowed ourselves to stray from our purpose of serving the community by focusing on our stuff. And we're spending too much time concentrating our time and energy and resources on what is in our spaces, all that stuff. And we are not fully living up to our mission to address community needs and serve the community. And, you know, we have, as a profession, let the pendulum swing too far towards the stuff and away from the people in our community. We are fundamentally about people. We are public servants. We serve the people in our community, especially marginalized populations who aren't by and large using the library. So think about that equity lens from Sandra Hughes Hassel. Too often we default to only serving the people who come through our doors, either virtual doors or physical doors. But to serve marginalized groups, that's harder because they're often the ones not coming to see us. So, and it's harder for us because we are these library servants and we are too busy focused and guarding our stuff to leave the library and go find these marginalized communities.
This entire video is linked on this PowerPoint slide, which is a PDF for you all. And anyone who's interested in sort of listening to the rest of this is just a small clip from the early pieces of this presentation is welcome to do so. And there's a lot to discuss here, which I've done with a couple of groups in my state, but more than anything, the information that's sort of listed here under being a public servant, even though it's what it is it's talking about sort of like every aspect of librarianship. But all of these focusing on the community, outreach, being listening, identifying resources and needs, and then co-creating solutions. Those are the steps for programming right there. Programming, services, interactions, all of it. Like this is essentially everything. And sort of sometimes what happens is we can become very blinded by sometimes trends and the big things, right? That sometimes we miss whether or not this is or isn't a fit for our particular community. It might be a fit for someone else's, but what about ours? This actually happened to a colleague who reached out to me who was really struggling because their library wanted to get the 3D printers and sort of all of the big things. But what this person knew from doing a lot of community work was that that wasn't what that particular community needed. That particular community needed something that was more of the idea of sort of a traditional library. That community wanted the books and it wanted sort of the author talks. It didn't want or need the big flashy tech stuff, even if 2 towns over, 2 libraries over, that particular community did. I've said the word community a lot. So the question is, what do we know about our communities, from the super users to those beyond, right? In my opinion, one of the best ways to sort of gather that information is to build what's called a community asset map. This page links to a video that we hosted in our state a couple of years ago, all about community asset mapping. But I find it the best way to gather information from a community. But like, what is it, right? For anyone who doesn't know, we know what the word community means. I've already said it about 37 times. But an asset, what is that, right? An asset is a gift, a skill, and capacity that can be shared with the community. And assets, and assets may exist in a multitude of ways. An asset might be a person. It might be an association, an institution, a physical asset, or a connection. So in short, right, an asset map is a document that holds the gifts and skills and capacities that can be shared with the community. This is a sample of a community asset map that I pulled from the internet. This is sort of an example of what that can look like. So the average pair of ears is going to hear the word map, and they're going to think that they need like something that looks not like this, right? But an asset map can sort of appear in a multitude of ways. I work for the Division of Library Development within the Connecticut State Library, and our asset map is in a spreadsheet, short and simple. It's a track of names and the names of organizations, the names of our contacts at said organization, their titles and contact information. That's it. Like, it's not even as fancy as all of this. It's kept in a shared location so that if anyone's working on a project or an initiative and they're looking to make contacts in a specific subset of the state, they are able to access that, identify an organization, identify a resource, and they're able to reach out to that person and begin to sort of co-create or do whatever it is that they want to do. I also just want to take a minute that, you know, this is kind of unglamorous. Does this asset map help us create one of our areas, or is it just a sample to view? You can use this to help you sort of think about some of the organizations that maybe aren't at the forefront of the mind when looking at your community. Absolutely. Use this to build upon, because it's here, and why not, right? Thank you for asking that question. So this is the kind of thing that that we can use if we are, for example, wanting to organize. I'm very, very big on environmentalism. If we did want to organize sort of an information session on environmentalism, if someone has an asset map and maybe they don't have the exact concept, the exact contact to a local grassroots organization, but if that information is in a shared departmental resource, then they're able to kind of find a step in, right? Or sort of identify a person who's ultimately able to help. This kind of thing is super important because let's take, for example, something like Money Smart Week. I don't know if you guys have that. We had that in our state. Can a children's department go online and find money-based activities? Absolutely. Can a circulation department put together a book display on financial independence or investing or whatever? Sure can. And the people who are already library users are going to see that display. The families who already come to children's programming are going to bring their kids to that activity. But if we pivot just a little bit and work, if we pivot and we begin working and building with, pulling examples from this chart here, local banks, small businesses, social servants agencies, it's going to help inform sort of the realistic day-to-day financial education needs of the people that they work with in a way that the library probably won't think to try to provide, because that's not a space in which we sort of sit in constantly. And what's also going to happen is those partner organizations are going to identify needs that we haven't thought of, and through joint partnership may bring people to this informational event, thus sort of addressing some of those needs mentioned in the video of reaching populations that don't already come into the library, the folks that aren't those super users. So through this asset map, we can also find gaps in community service. So the town that I currently live in, I think I said, is 11 square miles outside of the high school. There's no third space for teens in that town. There's no teen center, there's no boys and girls club, there's no local pool, no ice rink, there's no YMCA. None of this stuff exists. Unless you want to sit outside at a park or in Dunkin' Donuts, there's nowhere for that particular age group to go. And this is vital information to have, not only while planning programs and allocating program resources, but it's also the type of information that you're going to want to share with community stakeholders, board members, right? Mayors, the first selectmen. This is going to be some of the information that tells a story about your community and what the library can provide for your community members. Oh, good. Yes. Take this, Catherine. Take it and run. So here's some information that is incredibly interesting, and sort of some of the things that can happen when some of that pre-work isn't done, right? So these are samples of real towns in Connecticut. We're at the end of a year-long pilot initiative thing, and we have been doing some deep diving, some like really nitty-gritty, deep to the Earth's crust information gathering, and some further work, which is not important here, for 6 libraries in our town. 2 urban, 2 suburban, 2 rural. And this is some of the information around programming that was pulled from this work from certain towns. So the first town, the programming for 0 to 5-year-olds accounts for 35% of the total programming offered from that library. In that same town, 0 to 5-year-olds account for 5% of the population, but 35% of the total programming, resources, time, finances that library is offering. Programming for ages 6 to 19, which I know is a weird gap. I'm sorry, but this is the information that we have. Programming for ages 6 to 19 accounts for 31% of total programming that is being offered by this library in Town 1. And that age group accounts for 20% of the total population in that town. Programming for 20-plus-year-olds, 20 years old and up, accounts for 1/3 of the library's total programming offers, and they make up 75% of the town population. My mouth fell open when I saw that number, and my mouth fell open again when I realized that another town was doing something incredibly similar. Programming in Town 2 for 0 to 5-year-olds accounts for 1/3 of the total programming offerings from that library, and 0 to 5-year-olds make up less than 4% of the population in that town. Whereas programming for 20-plus-year-olds account for 17% of the programs offered by that library, and 20-year-olds and up make up 78% of the total population of that town. What they also were able to deduct with Town 2 is that the current adult attendance rate is near equal to the average attendance rate for the 0 to 5-year-olds. So it's not even that, well, more people come to the 0 to 5-year-old programming, so we need to give it more attention. No, the average attendance rate is the same. And yet the allocation, the resources, the time, when you look at the sheer numbers, are not. And 78% of a population either is not receiving the type of programming that they want. They don't know about there's a million things there's a lot to unpack with this. And we have been unpacking it and making some adjustments. But this is kind of something that can happen, like without sort of that pre-work and that intentional building and paying attention to all the unglamorous things. Like I also sometimes would much rather talk about just a fun program, but without paying attention to some of this unglamorous stuff, our program offerings and sort of the impact that programming has the potential to have in a community is incredibly unbalanced. So an understanding of the community really can and should drive program decision making. So again, like, it's possible that these libraries, would look at this information and be like, nah, I'm not super bothered. We're fine like this. We like things the way that they are. But maybe not, right? Maybe one of the towns have a ton of additional services and opportunities for adults, and that's why the library doesn't provide a lot of services. Maybe there's nothing for early literacy. But regardless, this information is vital to have so that you can at least understand what is happening from the perspective of programming in the community and why it's happening, especially when you tie in that community asset mapping and you understand some of the services that are being offered through other community institutions. So where does the physical programming start once you have begun to do some of that pre-work to understand your community? I think it starts with connected learning. What's that? So connected learning is when an interest is combined with a relationship and an opportunity is created. Where all three of those things intersect is connected learning. An older but very real life example of that from our state was called the Fairfield County Minecraft server. Fairfield County, that's the rich part of Connecticut. That's the part of Connecticut that's right by New York. And what happened was, I think we all might remember when Minecraft was super big. Maybe we played it, maybe we had kids who played it. It was the thing to do. And a librarian in Fairfield County with a lot of computer know-how created and built from scratch, don't ask me how, the Fairfield County Minecraft server as a space where kids could play this game, but in a safe and monitored environment, because anyone who knows about Minecraft, and I just participated in this activity, so I learned things could get really out of control with adults and kids, and it kind of got wild. So this person who built this server each town in Fairfield County had its own little like space where the kids could go and they could play and they could build, or they could sort of interact with each other as sort of the county. And it was amazing. This guy built all of this stuff and said, hey, if any of you want to set up your towns in this server, if you will come to us, we'll walk you through how to do it, how to set it up. We'll talk you through some of the safety features that we built into it. It was insane. And so me and two other coworkers, we got in a car, we drove, and we figured it out, and we set up our kids because we knew that they desperately wanted to play this. And I worked in a town that was very affluent, and many families had computer access. They had digital knowledge. So for my town that I currently worked in at the time, we knew that this was maybe a bit more appropriate than a town that did not have a high digital literacy rate, where a lot of homes did not have access to the internet or a computer, right? We knew that this was something that was appropriate to the town that we lived in. We knew from a myriad of other this, that, and the others that the kids would be interested in it. And we participated, right? So the interest in this case was Minecraft. The relationship was like a really kind librarian who knew about the server, and his outreach to other librarians in the area. And the opportunity was that each town got its own space in the server to exist as a community, but also to interact with others. It was really wild. The kids loved it. It was great, right? But that's the program itself is not the point, right? It's sort of the connected learning model that built an incredible experience for our participants. Now, it is possible that a library did notice the high interest in Minecraft from kids, teens, adults, and beyond in their community. So they bought more books and added them to their collection and built more displays and, maybe offered like a Minecraft program or something with like perler beads or swords or something. But leveraging the relationship that was sort of being shared through this individual librarian and a willingness to learn new skills that might be scary. Like didn't know anything about a server, created a larger opportunity with higher impact for our youth participants, higher and more grandiose than maybe like a book display. And in my town in particular, we actually had a high school student whose parent told me that they were very shy and reserved and didn't have a lot of friends. But this teen wound up leading these sort of like Minecraft clubs that happened in the Minecraft server because I didn't know how to play the game. I didn't know how to build whatever you build, table. I didn't know how to do anything there. So this opportunity that existed for players actually created a connected learning opportunity for a student who wanted to participate in a slightly different way in sort of a leadership capacity. It was beautiful, guys. But this is the difference between programming with intention, with an understanding of community, using sort of a connected learning principle and design. Buying books and making a display, absolutely within the purview of library. And those books are going to go out, man. Like the kids are going to come for them, right? Like it's not that one is necessarily better than the other. It's not that one should be done and the other shouldn't. It's not a no, but it is a yes, and, to use a term that my dad hates. So burnout, right? Because that's really big, right? Like to try to understand a server and go to another town and get training and then like, try to be in there and like watch it and sort of make sure that things are okay and host it's exhausting just to think about. Like I said, like I'm the nap queen over here. Like that's a lot. So the connected learning model and our conversation about the relationships that exist, right? So this relationship essentially came from the person who built the server. And then you could also say the relationship that I had with this parent who had this quiet kid who wanted to participate, right? There's sort of a lot of, the word relationship is kind of used a lot, right? There are a lot of types of let's call them program assistants, right? And we're gonna break into them a little bit, but active partnerships are going to go such a long way to combating library burnout and programming burnout. So let's talk about it. Program assistance. There are a lot of ways in which members of the community can assist with Minecraft, Cookbook Club, Books and Brews, whatever it may be. And so sort of the breakdown that we use in our state of that is first, we've got personnel, right? Library employees. That person who built the Minecraft server was someone's library employee and was someone's personnel. Then we've got contractor or a consultant, which is someone who is paid for their service. So if you are working on your strategic plan, you might hire a consultant, someone from the outside, to come in and help do the heavy lifting of building a new strategic plan. And then you've got supporters, right? Which are organizations or individuals who like endorse a program, who think it's a really great idea, who tell a lot of people about it. That might be the local schools in your community who are like, oh, this sounds so great. Give us some flyers and we'll put it up on the library website, and we'll put it in the school library, and we'll stick flyers in all the little kids' backpacks, right? Supporters, great. But what I'm talking about when I say active partnerships is sort of how we describe partners here. Organizations that contribute resources, energy, time, action, right? It might be supplies, it might be staff, it might be transportation. Maybe you're partnering with like a bus company. It could just be brain power, which is sometimes the most exhausting thing, used to come up with this stuff. You should do something around environmentalism, but like, what, right? Sometimes it's the brain power. That active partner has the potential to help alleviate some of the burnout and the exhaustion and just like the energy depletion in a way that perhaps a supporter yes, thank you very much for sharing this program and the time and the flyer, but it's not helping you with any of like, it's not helping you with as much of the heavy lifting of some of those action-based needs for a program. Oh, and I put a note in there for myself that I want to say to everyone, and I want you to write it on a Post-it if you need to. No one can do all the things all the time, all alone. No one. Well, maybe you can, but you're going to be very tired. Write that down. Anyone who feels like they need it. So we do some time for some examples, right? So some examples of putting all of this together, right? All of the things that we talked about. These are two programs that I gave a grant for. So I got all the nitty gritty details about them. And they did a lot of this. I sure can. No one can do all the things all the time, all alone. Can't do it. Can't do it. Don't do it. Shouldn't do it. So two examples of some programs that kind of did all of these things here that aren't necessarily enormous, ginormous things. We had a town that did a screen printing program series for teens in their community. They had local business partners, active partners. They directly organized this workshop as a result of surveys from the previous summer. So they were specifically and intentionally told through surveys on paper that could be quantified and conversations throughout the library that that library did not offer enough active programs for teens. Not all ages, not families, not anyone who wants to come, for the teens. Because in youth services, a lot of that stuff, all ages and family programming, can sometimes be coded as for the littles, not a 17-year-old. And they partnered with a local residential alternative school because it had come to their attention that the students in this school who typically did not go out into the community were really missing out on some of the community services that were being offered for a multitude of reasons. So they went directly to this alternative school to purposefully, meaningfully engage their students in a way in which was deemed appropriate through conversation, co-work, and co-design. There was also a program called Improv Ability, the cutest program to this day that I think I've ever seen in my entire life. It was a program for adults with developmental needs. The creation of the program came as a result of another program. It was kind of an accident. Improv programs were offered to a series of organizations in this town, and they found that with this particular group of adults with a variety of developmental needs, improv went a long way towards making some of these adults who typically didn't speak a lot. It engaged them in ways that even some of the workers at these facilities were unprepared for. The library had already made a commitment to improving resources and services around accessibility. So the library was already doing work, already perhaps made a statement in 2020, sort of, redid their strategic plan. They had already actively decided to put more resources towards an underserved community group. And this program built upon that. And they partnered, again, active partners that went beyond sort of information sharing with two local organizations and executed an amazing program. And what more about the Improbability program is it actually didn't quite start out that way. They left out some of the pre-work and they didn't do as much co-design as they should have. And the entire program was almost a bust. It almost didn't work. Because this was a grant initiative and we had already exceeded the funds, I got a call from the program organizer who was very concerned. Through some talking between she and I, through some co-design that hadn't been done previously with the community, previously they had been programming for the community, they ultimately built a better program than what was initially sort of designed. And it was absolutely amazing to see. A video existed. I'm going to try to find it and maybe I'll share that and upload that as well. But basically, because again, I'm not here to sort of dive deep into individual programs that can kind of be copy pasted in another location because of everything I've set up until now. But just sort of I can attest to multiple examples of folks doing this pre-work, having an understanding of their community through asset mapping, actual partnerships, active partnerships, so that these larger programs weren't burning up all the time, energy, attention, and brain space of the organizers. And really incredibly high impact opportunities came out of this work, right? They were able to provide multi-layered programming with high impact to its intended audience, right? And it was an absolutely beautiful thing to see, and it was even more interesting to sort of see the second adult program and how not doing some of this unglamorous work almost destroyed the whole thing. It was almost impossible to do. So when we're talking about burnout, right, these are sort of some of the general things that can help. And I'm sure none of it is new, but maybe having it all on one slideshow from like a fancy consultant will sort of help. I don't know. But focusing on capacity really is key. Like I said, we've got a ton of tiny libraries here with like one full-time person. To expect them to have the same output as a multi-branch, award-winning, large staffed library is just absolutely foolish, absolutely foolish. So focusing on capacity is forefront. Co-creation and co-designing with the community. The amount of time and the mental burden that some librarians can feel when they're developing program can be like magnanimous. And removing the burden of guessing what your community members want and trying to figure out how to give them what you think they want and working with them to design something to fulfill a need can just can really release a mental burden. Again, like we mentioned, community partnerships. In addition to those community supporters and staff members, and those can be identified and nurtured once you've done some of the work of identifying these folks via asset map. I really like to say quality over quantity. I would rather offer 3 or 4 high impact, high output programs than 15 candy sushi sessions. I don't know why I keep saying candy sushi. Maybe because it makes my teeth hurt. That's all I have to say on that. Data, information gathering, communication, stories, right? How we mentioned some of that data from those sample libraries from the initiative that we're working with. That is vital information, and being able to share that information through story with community stakeholders can gather you additional community partners and additional community supporters as you sort of begin to make intentional shifts in some of your offerings, if you've identified that those are shifts that need to happen. And I think most importantly is a growth mindset, right? A growth mindset is sort of the belief that one's intelligence or ability can be grown or developed through persistence and effort and a focus on learning. You're going to get a lot of information throughout the conference at these sessions and future conferences and future professional development orientations. And it can be easier, I think, than any of us want for us to kind of think, yay, this is super great. And, or, oh my gosh, this is great, but hard, or, who's got the time? Just the human nature, just so many like we roadblocks pop up all over the place. And I think just sort of some work on mindset and mindset shifts. And this might look difficult, but what can I do, right? Like who can I call to help? Like who can I bring in? What can I do? Just sort of a mindset shift is going to take us significantly farther, I think, than we give it credit for in fields like librarianship. And evaluating success, right? One more thing to help combat burnout is the way that we evaluate success in library programming, right? In order to measure success, it's really important to move beyond like outputs and think about what designs success in terms of outcomes. Numbers are only going to give us so much, right? Especially if we're trying to move into identifying needs and partners in communities that aren't our super users, marginalized communities, right? Invisible communities. It's really changes in behaviors and attitudes and learning that's the success that we want to see. And we might have to sort of change the way we have those conversations with the important people. Right, like the fancy folks, we might need to adjust the way that we talk to them if they're pushing for those numbers. But numbers don't always help us tell the story in the ways that that our programs leverage community assets and help meet the challenges within our community, particularly those systemically marginalized and invisible communities. So just a reminder, relationship building takes a lot of time, right? You know, you kind of start off in the weeds. Understanding takes time, but the more you walk through those weeds, like the easier some of this stuff gets. And that mindset shift takes time. And eventually it's going to become second nature, like walking down a forest path. So that is it for me. And I am ready to take any questions that anyone might have. And here's my email.
Thank you, Kim. I'm hoping that people got a lot of good stuff out of that. I sure did. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat or Q&A. I can be counted on to always have lots of questions, so I have a question for you, a few of them. I'm wondering if you have any insight, and I bet you do, for people who are in very small towns where it's harder to find the assets in that tiny town. Do you have any suggestions of ways to start?
I do. I worked in a tiny town with like 7,000 people. I've been there. It was wild and confusing. But something that they did, and they actually did it after I left. Like I wasn't even smart enough to figure this out in the moment. Someone else came in and really ran with it, was identifying non-traditional assets. So even in the asset map, you're going to see big things like the VA, the Veterans Affairs, you know, the Boys and Girls Club, banks. You're gonna 600. I think that's the size of my old high school. You're gonna find you're gonna find a lot of people referencing some of those traditional assets. But in this tiny town, they tapped into assets like farms. Right. Because there were it was a big farming community. There was first there was one like sandwich shop that was also the one stoplight, but then another one happened. And they partnered with this teeny tiny like little drink shop, which I think was also the post office. And you also don't have to have a million assets, right? Again, we want to work within the capacity of our space. And even if it's some local farms, even if it's the volunteer firefighters, maybe your town doesn't have a volunteer firefighter. That's okay. My town's 11 square miles. We don't have anything. Everything's in New Haven next door. I'm in West Haven. There's nothing there. No one knows where it is. It's to the west of New Haven. So I think it's really interesting to focus on those non-traditional assets. And what that tiny town that I worked in was also able to do through a lot of hard work, and it did take some time, was able to identify small businesses that existed that might be like a person doing woodworking in their garage, I think was like a very real thing. So I think what we need to do in some of these tiny towns is we need to move away from some of those traditional assets that sound too grandiose for the space in which we're in. And that's when that relationship building plays a big part. And sometimes maybe it's just the different types of questions or conversations that you're initiating at the circulation desk. And then you find out that someone is screen printing in their spare room, right? So That's my suggestion. It's hard. And again, remember my little slide, it takes time. It does not happen overnight, which is very frustrating. But it is possible.
Thank you. And I think that's one of the superpowers of smaller libraries as well, that they are good at developing those relationships with individuals in their communities. So yeah. I hope you saw that.
I did.
You lit a fire in Catherine. So
So
would you say
excited.
that, yeah, here's a question from Sarah. Do you see that one?
Yeah, would you say building relationships and our assets would be the first step in creating great program? Oh, I'm saying great programming. Yes, and I think those two things can happen simultaneously, right? I think, and a great place to start might actually be with your library assets, right? So start with your library staff members. Who do they know? What do they know? What connections do they have within the community? Your friends group, who do they know? What connections do they have? Your board, who did they know, right? So I think you can actually start with the assets within your building, or what weird skills do people on your staff have that you don't know about? I crochet. I would love to have someone. I taught a little girl how to crochet over the summer. It was great. We made a duck hat. You can start within the confines of your own building and then just sort of build out, right? And as you begin to identify these assets, those are just names on paper, right? So then you've got to work, and small towns are actually great for this. When I started working at that town, they put me in the newspaper. There are photos, I mean, like, because that's just what some of these towns do. Not all, but that's what some of these towns do. And then what I like to suggest with regards to relationship building, don't wait to build a relationship until you need something. I wouldn't start a conversation when I have a need. Sometimes you just want to say hi. You just want to introduce yourself. You want to ask about their services. Again, don't make it about the library first. Just begin to sort of know people and learn people. And then when an opportunity arises, you have a relationship there that can help you. I'm working on a food literacy series at my library, and this session has made me feel so energized. That brings me so much joy. Good luck on your food literacy series. I am a big food conscious person from an environmental perspective, so I think that's really great.
Very cool. Keep any questions. We have probably time for another couple questions. I have a question. Again, I can always be relied on for questions. I loved what you said about mindset and shifting your mindset. And I'm wondering if you have any additional suggestions for supporting that, because that's kind of a big project.
It is. And for me, it's a little hard because everyone's mind and sort of their mindset is built off of experiences that they have had, right? So you have some people that are just as Pollyanna as the movie, right? I mean, they're just, it's going to be fine. It's great, right? Like a lot of times our mindset, I like to call it the baby brain. I don't know if anyone's ever done the brain architecture workshop. It's really interesting, but so much of our mindset and sort of who we become and the way we view the world starts in infancy. So it's going to be different for everyone. And I know something that helped me was beginning to say no to stuff. I found that I was very overwhelmed with asks, and I felt like I needed to say yes to everything because I like tied it to like my self-worth. It was like this whole big thing. Oldest child syndrome is kind of what I call it. Like you do and you say yes, and like you feel good about what you can put out into the world and what you can offer. But I found that a lot of that was just like really beginning to make me kind of like cynical about stuff, and like it just wasn't working out. So something that I promised myself I would do, I was like, I'm gonna start saying no to stuff. I'm gonna start quitting some stuff because my mind and my soul, like everything was just getting so bogged down, and I stopped caring about anything because I was trying to do everything. So I think everyone's approach to this is going to be very different. Because your mindset and your personhood is so affected by that. But if you think starting no would It hit me too, Cheyenne. It hit me too when I realized that I was doing that. But it was beginning to affect my care and my attention and my time to the things that mattered because I was just trying to do too much for just dumb reasons. I hope that helped. Yes, oldest child.
Thank
My
you.
siblings are 9 and 12 years younger than me, so I was the extra oldest child. When I went to college, my sister went to kindergarten. It was just wild. So.
That's awesome. Thank you, Kim. That was just wonderful. And it looks like a lot of people got pretty inspired. So thank you very much. I'm going to remind folks that there's a survey that will be coming up right after you exit, and will also come to your email. Then that feedback actually is helpful to us. So if you can take the time, it won't take very long. The next session in this track is about board games in the library, and it begins at 10:30. I hope to see you there. And if not, I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thanks again, Kim. I'm going to stop recording. That was great.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm